what we're hearing is 4 airports. Now, we have 22 airports, if I'm correct, 22 airports. If you give away the 4 airports that bring the revenue in, and I want to believe that the Airports Authority would agree with what I'm saying, that the bigger airports service the smaller airports because of the amount of traffic that goes into the smaller airports as against the running costs of the smaller airports. So I would want to say that a model that would work, unless the government's plan is to make the smaller airports private airstrips for the states. But if you want all the airports to be functional, I would expect that anybody put it up in regions. So anybody that decides to take up the Lagos concession should be able to take on Ibadan, take on Ilorin, take on Akure Airport, take on Benin. Likewise, Abuja in the north central, Port Harcourt, the southeast, and Kano takes up the north. The reason for this is if they take up the 4 major airports where there is huge activity presently, so you find that if the airports, the 4 major airports are taken up with the other airports left, you'd find airports that are abandoned or airports that are just struggling to survive, to be able to manage. And let's look at examples. Fire engines have periodical maintenance, which are high costs. Now, if you have just one domestic flight coming into an airport 2-3 times a week, there's no way it's going to cover the costs of manpower alone, let alone managing these airports. So the private sector will be able to look at these airports and look at areas where you can have an airport where you can attach a flying school to it, you can attach business models. We can take the Stansted model, for instance, where Ryanair and EasyJet decided to come in there and the airports enjoy services, the restaurants, the shops inside the airport while the 2 airliners do the flying, and that's why you can afford to get a ticket for 10, 20, 30 pounds to fly regionally within the UK and all that with such low-cost carriers. And even introduce low-cost carriers in Nigeria, there's nothing wrong with that, without certain benefits. And this is what I go back to say, airlines, the kind of aircrafts that we use in some of these airports, that's where we would now digress. The private sector will be able to look at that critically. You talked about concessions earlier. You have a BOT kind of concession, which is what we have in MMA2. There are concessions that keep running. It depends on what the return on investment is for the investor that is taking up the concession and the government that is giving the concession if the agreement subsists and it can be renewed. There's nothing to say that concessions cannot be renewed if their tenures expire. If we look at our airport now, there's huge challenges in our airports at the moment. Yes, the government have made an effort to try and extend, if I use Lagos as a case study, to try and extend the airport, but it still doesn't take away the challenges that the existing building has. So I would say I fully support concessioning at this point. But concessioning, taking other smaller airports along with them, not just concessioning the ones that yield revenue presently. Aviation is not like a bank where you can teach somebody to be a teller in 1 week. The skills acquired in the aviation industry are acquired over time, and you can't just pick people on the streets to actually manage your airports, especially the operational side of the airport. So I want to believe that with the concessions, there will be agreements put in place. Of course, you cannot run away from the fact that there will be some degree of job losses because an investor will also be looking at competence. And those are the things they'll be looking at. They will be looking at consultants coming in to make sure that the existing people have the required competence to run at that level that would ensure that the airports are yielding profits and not running at a loss or, just as an airport existing. Let's even go back as far as Virgin Atlantic. In the early millennium, there was an agreement in place that Virgin Atlantic was supposed to work and have an agreement with Virgin Nigeria where there was a hub within the international airport. And, the government woke up one morning and changed the whole thing. So does that encourage investors to come into Nigeria is the million-dollar question. It's a good thing. We encourage investors, we encourage people to come into Nigeria, invest, encourage concessions, because with MMA2, it's evidently clear that the private sector will be able to manage areas that are not critical, in quote. I would not say AFSEC, for instance, the security, the fire areas are critical, which I would believe the Airports Authority and the agencies that are managing them presently should manage them. But other areas to promote business, both landside, especially landside business, the private sector will do a better job.
Job losses loom in the aviation industry as United Airlines plans its exit from Nigeria. There's more on Newsflash. Do join us again.